The silent warning. The galaxy had been silent for a long time. For centuries, the various species that inhabited it had lived their lives, exploring, trading, and at times, fighting one another. But there was one thing every race had learned in their travels: to steer clear of Earth. Even the most advanced civilizations have learned this lesson. The Old Ones, a race older than time itself, had once tried to conquer Earth, but when they reached the planet, they quickly turned away, never speaking of it again. The records of their failure were erased from the public databases, as if the entire event had never happened. And now, generations later, the galaxy was still haunted by the warning left behind. Stay away from Earth. It is a place you should never visit. Not because of humans, but because of what lies beneath. The Galactic Council had long since dismissed these warnings as superstition, a strange myth of a forgotten age. However, something had changed. A deep space probe from one of the newest species, the Vaxorians, had sent back strange readings. It was nothing like they had seen before. The usual patterns of life and energy that were observed around planets had all but disappeared. Instead, there was only silence. No signs of activity. No signals. Just an empty, ominous void. This unsettling data was enough to grab the attention of the Council, even if they dismissed it as a malfunction. After all, probes had failed before. But this time, there was something different. The anomaly wasn't just a glitch. It was a sign, something that couldn't be ignored. A small crew, led by Captain Rennick of the Vaxorian fleet, was assigned the mission to investigate. His crew was a mix of seasoned explorers and advanced scientists, each one handpicked for their unique skills. They were chosen not only because they were skilled, but because they had seen and experienced things beyond the imagination of most races. They had explored dangerous planets, discovered lost technologies, and even survived attacks by hostile forces. However, none of them knew that Earth would prove to be their greatest challenge. The Vaxorian ship, the Wraith, silently slipped into orbit around Earth. Rennick stood on the bridge, staring at the planet below through the transparent walls of the command room. It looked peaceful, so very ordinary. A blue and green marble suspended in the vast emptiness of space. Nothing about it seemed dangerous, and yet the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. The warnings from the ancient races, the ones that had been passed down through every generation, echoed in his mind. The sensors on the ship suddenly beeped, pulling him back to reality. He turned to the technician, Esha, who was analyzing the data from the scan. "There's something wrong," Esha said quietly. Her hands flew across the control panel, zooming in on certain areas of the planet's surface. The usual signals are missing. No communication, no radio waves. It's almost like it's being shut off. "Shut off?" Rennick asked, stepping closer. "What do you mean?" Esha frowned, pointing at the readouts. "We should be picking up at least some sort of electromagnetic pulse from Earth, radio chatter, signals, even something basic. But there's nothing. It's completely dead." Rennick narrowed his eyes. "Can you be sure? Maybe it's a malfunction." "I've double-checked," Esha replied. "This is something different. There's a pattern. Like someone is deliberately blocking us." Rennick's mind raced. Earth had always been a place of mystery. But the more he stared at the data in front of him, the more he realized something wasn't right. The rest of the crew had gathered in the bridge, and they all exchanged uneasy glances. The last time something this strange had happened, it was a warning from the Old Ones. "Captain, I suggest we take a closer look," Esha said. "We need to know what's going on down there." Rennick hesitated, his instincts screaming at him. Everything about this mission felt wrong, but he couldn't turn back now. They had already come this far, and the Council had ordered them to gather information, no matter the cost. "Prepare a landing party," Rennick ordered. "We'll go down to the surface. But keep your weapons ready. We don't know what we'll find." The crew quickly geared up and made their way to the shuttle bay. As they descended towards Earth, Rennick couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The ship's sensors continued to fail, and no matter how much the team tried to recalibrate, nothing changed. The planet beneath them remained eerily quiet. As their shuttle broke through the atmosphere and descended toward the surface, the world below came into view. Towering mountains, vast oceans, and sprawling cities. Earth looked like a beautiful, peaceful place, but the silence in the air was deafening. There was no sound of air traffic, no signs of life. Nothing. The shuttle touched down in a remote area just outside one of the larger cities. The crew disembarked, weapons drawn, scanning their surroundings. Rennick's heart raced as he stepped onto the ground. It felt unnatural. The very air was thick with tension, as though the planet itself was holding its breath. "Stay alert," Rennick said, his voice low. "Something is wrong here." The team moved cautiously, their boots crunching against the ground as they made their way toward the city. As they neared the outskirts, they saw the first signs of life. An abandoned building, its windows shattered, the doors wide open. It looked like it had been untouched for years. Aisha pulled out her scanner and began to scan the area. "The energy readings are all over the place," she muttered. "Nothing makes sense." Rennick's eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon. Something was drawing him toward the heart of the city, a strange pull he couldn't explain. It was as if something was calling him, urging him to move closer. But his mind told him to be cautious. "We need to get to the source of the signal," he said. "Let's move." They made their way through the city, but it wasn't long before they encountered something they hadn't expected. An alien artifact, half buried in the rubble of a collapsed building. The markings on it were ancient, and Rennick recognized them instantly. They were symbols of the Old Ones, the very race that had disappeared from the galaxy long ago. "This doesn't make sense," Rennick said, staring at the artifact. "Why is this here? Earth shouldn't have any record of the Old Ones." The team gathered around the object, their curiosity piqued. Aisha reached out and touched the surface of the artifact. The moment her fingers made contact, a flash of light erupted from it, blinding them all. The ground shook violently beneath them, and the sky above seemed to darken. For a brief moment, Rennick felt something brush against his mind. An ancient, unfathomable presence. A voice, deep and resonating, echoed in his mind. "You were warned. You should have never come." The ground cracked open beneath their feet as the artifact began to pulse with energy, sending waves of power through the earth itself. And then, in an instant, everything went dark. Darkness surrounded them. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was deeper, heavier, like a presence pressing against their minds. Captain Rennick tried to move, but his body felt frozen, as if trapped in a void. The last thing he remembered was the artifact pulsing with energy, the ground shaking, and then nothing. A distant hum echoed through the air, growing louder with each passing second. Suddenly, a bright blue light flickered into existence, breaking the void apart. Rennick gasped as he found himself back on the ground. Lying on his back, his crew members were scattered around him, groaning as they regained consciousness. Aisha coughed, pulling herself up. "What happened?" she asked, her voice shaking. Rennick forced himself to sit up, his head pounding. The artifact was still there, but its glow had faded. The city around them, which had been eerily silent before, now felt different. The air was thick with an energy that hadn't been there before, like the planet had just woken up from a deep sleep. "There was a pulse," Rennick muttered. "And then, I don't know, something hit us." His second in command, a hardened warrior named Keldor, checked his weapon. "We should leave. Now." Rennick understood the fear in Keldor's voice. Whatever had just happened was beyond their understanding. But something told him they couldn't leave yet. They had uncovered something the galaxy had tried to forget. Aisha was still staring at the artifact, her hands trembling. "Captain, look at this." She pointed to the markings. They had changed. The once faded engravings were now glowing, shifting as if alive. Lines of unreadable text crawled across the surface, forming symbols that pulsed like a heartbeat. Keldor growled, "This is wrong. This shouldn't be happening." Before Rennick could respond, the air around them rippled. A deep vibration shook the ground, and suddenly, a strange whisper filled the air. It wasn't a sound, it was something else, something that crawled into their minds. Rennick's breathing became shallow. The whisper was a voice. No, many voices, speaking in unison. "You have awakened us." The crew tensed. Weapons were drawn, but there was nothing to aim at. "You were warned to stay away." A shadow moved in the distance. At first, it looked like a figure, a humanoid form standing at the edge of the ruins. But then it shifted, warping and stretching. Like it wasn't bound by normal physics. More figures appeared, emerging from the cracks in the ground, from the broken buildings, from the very air itself. Aisha clutched her scanner. I can't get a reading. These things, they're not normal." Rennick could feel it. The presence wasn't just in front of them. It was everywhere, watching, waiting. The warning from the ancient records suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't humans the galaxy feared. It was this. Keldor took a step back, his voice barely above a whisper. "Captain, I think we've just made a mistake." Rennick tightened his grip on his weapon, his heart pounding. They had come looking for answers. Instead, they had awakened something that should have remained buried. And now, it was watching them. The ground trembled again, more violently this time. The strange figures, which had once seemed so distant, were now closer, far closer, looming like dark shadows in the corners of their vision. The whispers filled the air, growing louder and more urgent, as if the very planet itself was speaking to them. Rennick's pulse quickened. His mind raced as he tried to make sense of what was happening. "We need to move," Keldor snapped, his voice tight with fear. "This is not a place for us. Whatever's out there, we can't fight it." Rennick turned to face him. His mind was torn between the overwhelming fear gnawing at him and a strange, undeniable curiosity. What had they uncovered here? Why did the galaxy's oldest species fear Earth so much? Aisha was still staring at the artifact, her fingers tracing the glowing symbols. "There's something more to this," she murmured. "The readings. They're changing again." Rennick's gaze followed her finger, and for the first time, he saw what she meant. The symbols weren't just shifting. They were forming coherent patterns, forming a language, an ancient language. He leaned in closer, his breath catching in his throat. "Captain, look at this." Aisha's voice barely reached him. "It's a map." The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. It wasn't just a map, it was a warning. The path traced across the surface of the artifact led deep into the heart of Earth, a forbidden zone marked in bold, jagged lines, a place sealed away from all outsiders, a place that should never be disturbed. Rennick could feel the weight of that truth pressing down on him. The figures around them seemed to grow more solid, their shadows stretching toward the crew. The whispers seemed to become more insistent, as though the planet itself was crying out in desperation. "Why do they fear this place?" Rennick whispered. The words felt heavy, as though the very air was thick with the ancient history they had awoken. Aisha looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. "Because it's not just the humans they're afraid of. It's what we protect." The realization hit him with the force of a lightning strike. There was something buried deep within Earth, a power so old, so vast, that even the oldest species in the galaxy feared its existence. The whispers had warned them, not because of humanity, but because of what humans guard. Rennick turned to Keldor, who was still eyeing the shadowy figures warily. "Get the crew together. We need to move now. If we stay here much longer, we're not just risking our lives. There's something bigger at play." Keldor nodded, his face grim. "Aye, Captain. But where do we go?" The figures were getting closer, their forms flickering in and out of existence. Their glowing eyes watched the crew, as though they knew what had been discovered, as though they knew they could no longer be ignored. Rennick's mind raced. He knew they couldn't stay here. The artifact, the map, was leading them somewhere. But where? "There's one place we haven't checked yet," Rennick said, his voice steady, but with an edge of urgency. The deep core. The deep core was the heart of the Earth, the place where no one had ventured in centuries. Ancient records spoke of it, but it was a place that had been sealed away from the universe, hidden from all but a select few. But the map was leading them there. "There's no turning back," Esha said quietly, her eyes locked on the symbols. "If we go there, we'll have to face what they've been hiding." Rennick nodded grimly. "And if we don't, we'll never know what's really at stake. This is bigger than us, than anything we could have imagined." Keldor growled, tightening his grip on his weapon. "Then we better be ready. If the galaxy's oldest species fears this place, we're walking straight into the heart of danger." Rennick didn't need to say anything more. He could feel it. This was their only chance. Whatever they had uncovered on Earth, it wasn't just a relic. It was the key to something far more dangerous, something so ancient and powerful that the universe had tried to erase it from memory. And now, they were about to discover the truth. The ground shook again, but this time, it wasn't the vibrations of the planet itself. This time, it was something else, something waking up beneath them. Rennick took a deep breath. The deep core was waiting. They had no choice but to follow its pull. "Let's go," he said, his voice resolute. The crew gathered around him, and they set off into the heart of Earth, unaware of what awaited them, but certain of one thing. This was only the beginning, and whatever they found, it would change everything. The descent into the deep core was not just a journey downward, it was a journey into the unknown. Rennick led the team through the underground tunnels, their flashlights barely illuminating the twisting rock formations around them. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became, charged with something unnatural. Isha kept glancing at her scanner. The readings made no sense. "These energy levels," she muttered. "It's like we're approaching a living pulse." Rennick didn't respond. He could feel it too, an unseen presence pressing against his mind. It wasn't hostile. It wasn't welcoming. It was watching. Behind him, Keldor adjusted his weapon. "Captain, I don't like this," he growled. "Whatever is down here, it knows we're coming." They pushed forward until they reached a vast cavern. The walls shimmered with strange, glowing veins that pulsed in rhythm with their own heartbeats, and in the center of the cavern stood it. A structure, ancient beyond comprehension, lay half-buried in the rock. It was massive, larger than any ship they had ever seen, yet shaped with an unnatural elegance. Its surface was inscribed with symbols that glowed dimly, as if they had been waiting for something, for someone, to arrive. Isha's breath caught. This is not human." Rennick stepped closer, running his hand across the cold surface. "No," he agreed, "but it's been here longer than humanity has." The moment his fingers touched the metal, the cavern trembled. The ship awoke. A deep hum filled the air, growing into a resonant vibration that shook the ground beneath them. The glowing veins on the walls brightened, spreading outward like a network of living circuits. And then, the whispers returned. But this time, they weren't just whispers. They were voices. "You were never meant to find this." The words rang inside their minds, spoken in a voice that was neither alien nor human, but something in between. It was ancient, layered, filled with knowledge and something else, something like regret. Aisha clutched her head. Who are you?" The ship responded, not with words, but with images, flashes of a time long before humans, before the galactic empires, before anything the universe remembered. A war. A force so terrible that even the most powerful civilizations fell before it. A weapon. This weapon was created not to be used, but to be buried, hidden on Earth, protected by time itself. Rennick staggered back, gasping. He understood now. This wasn't just a secret. This was the reason the galaxy feared Earth. Not because of humans, because of what slept beneath their feet. And now, it was waking up. The ground beneath their feet rumbled as the ancient structure came to life. The hum in the air grew louder, vibrating through their bones. Rennick could feel the weight of the ship's power, like a storm gathering deep inside the Earth. His team stood frozen in shock, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. "Do you see this?" Aisha whispered, her voice trembling. She was staring at the glowing symbols on the walls, which were now shifting and rearranging, forming a map that led deeper into the heart of the planet. Rennick took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "It's a warning," he said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "We weren't meant to find this place, and now that we have." The vibrations intensified, and the structure's surface rippled like liquid metal. An unseen force tugged at Rennick's mind, trying to pull him closer, urging him to unlock the ship's secrets. The whispers had become louder now, more urgent, as though the very essence of the ship was reaching out to them. "You must leave." The voice, both ancient and cold, echoed in their minds. It was not a request. It was a command. The ship was alive, aware of their presence, and it feared what they might uncover. Keldor tightened his grip on his weapon. "Captain, we need to get out of here. This place isn't just a danger to us. It's a danger to the whole galaxy." Rennick hesitated. He knew Keldor was right, but something in him, something deep and primal, drove him to stay. This was the discovery of a lifetime. Whatever this ship was, whatever secret it held, it could change everything they knew about the universe. "We can't leave," Rennick said firmly. "We've come too far. We need to understand what this is, and why the galaxy's oldest species is so afraid of it." Aisha looked up at him, fear and determination in her eyes. "Rennick, this ship, this weapon, it's alive. It's not just a machine. It's thinking. And if it's reacting like this, then we may have just triggered something that's been dormant for millennia." Rennick knew she was right, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. "We can't stop now. We have to finish this." Suddenly, the ship's interior brightened, and the symbols flared with blinding light. The vibrations escalated, and the ground beneath them cracked open. A massive, glowing sphere began to form at the center of the ship, casting a sickly green light that filled the cavern. Rennick stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the intense glow. "What is that?" he gasped. Isha's voice was filled with dread. "That's it. That's the heart of the ship." The sphere pulsed, and with each pulse, the whispers grew louder. They became more distinct, no longer just an echo in their minds, but full sentences, sentences that carried with them an overwhelming sense of fear. "The time has come. The barrier is breaking. The children of the void are waking." Rennick's heart skipped a beat. The words made no sense, yet the terror in them was palpable. He turned to Aisha, his eyes wide. "What does it mean? Who are the children of the void?" Before Aisha could answer, the ship's hum turned into a roar. The walls cracked open, and from the heart of the ship, a massive energy beam shot upward, through the layers of rock and into the sky. The beam didn't just light the sky, it shattered it. The team was thrown to the ground by the shockwave. Rennick gasped for air, his vision blurred from the intensity of the explosion. The world seemed to spin around him. He could hear Keldor's voice faintly through the chaos. "Captain, we have to leave now. Whatever is happening, it's already out of our control." Rennick struggled to his feet, his heart racing. He glanced at Aisha, who was still holding her head, her face pale with fear. "The children of the void. What does it mean, Aisha? What did we just awaken?" Aisha looked up, her eyes filled with the same terror that had gripped Rennick's heart. "I don't know," she said softly. "But I think whatever it is, it's older than anything we've ever known. And it's coming for us." Before Rennick could respond, the ground beneath them began to shake once more violently than ever before. The walls of the cavern cracked open further, and the ship's heart pulsed with a menacing energy. The whispering voices grew to a deafening roar. They are coming. The children of the void are coming. Rennick's mind raced. He didn't know what the children of the void were, but he could feel the presence of something terrible, something ancient, bearing down on them. The ancient species of the galaxy had warned everyone to stay away from Earth, but they hadn't told the full story. This wasn't about humans. It was about something far worse. A force so powerful, so terrifying, that even the oldest species feared it. And now, it was waking up. Rennick's instincts screamed at him to leave, but deep inside, he knew one thing for certain: there was no escaping what they had unleashed. They were in the fight of their lives, and this was only the beginning. The sky above Earth was no longer the same. The energy beam that had erupted from the ship's core had torn through the atmosphere, creating a swirling vortex of darkness and light. Something beyond the stars had noticed, and now it was coming. Rennick and his team stood at the edge of the ancient chamber, watching as the ship pulsed with unnatural energy. The whispers in their minds had stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. A silence that felt like the moment before a storm. Keldor gripped his rifle tighter. "Captain, we need to leave. Now." Rennick didn't argue. Whatever they had awakened, it was far beyond anything they could handle. But as they turned to flee, the cavern walls began to warp and twist, as if reality itself was breaking apart. Then the first tear appeared. A jagged, pitch-black rift split the air before them, crackling with unnatural energy. Through it, something moved, a shadow that seemed to consume the light around it. Isha gasped, stepping back. "That's not just a rift, it's a doorway." Rennick felt his blood run cold. A doorway. But a doorway to where? Or worse, to what? The whispers returned. "They are here. They have waited long enough." The black rift widened, and for the first time, Rennick saw them. Dark figures, shifting and writhing like living shadows, emerged from the void. Their forms flickered between shapes, humanoid, monstrous, and something else entirely. Their eyes burned with unnatural light, cold and ancient. Keldor raised his weapon. "Stand back." He fired, but the energy blasts vanished the moment they touched the creatures. It was as if the shots had been swallowed by the void itself. The creatures didn't flinch. They merely turned their gaze toward the team, their voices echoing with something far worse than hatred: hunger. Rennick forced himself to move. Run. They bolted toward the exit, but the ship itself had come alive. Walls shifted, closing off paths. The very ground beneath them tilted, throwing them off balance. The creatures stepped closer, their movements unnatural, like something that had never walked in this universe before. Aisha cried out as one of them reached toward her, its fingers stretching like liquid shadow. Rennick grabbed her arm, pulling her back just as Keldor swung his blade through the creature's arm. For a moment, it seemed to work, the limbs severed, dissolving into mist. But then, the mist reformed, reshaping itself. The creature didn't bleed. It didn't feel pain. It merely watched them. More of the rifts were opening now, across the cavern, in the skies above, and Rennick's heart nearly stopped, in orbit. This wasn't just about Earth. The void had come for the galaxy. Isha's voice was barely a whisper. This is why they feared Earth. Not because of humans, but because of this. Rennick looked at her, realization dawning. The warnings, the forbidden zones, the fear of the ancient species, it wasn't about humans at all. Earth was a prison for the children of the void. And they had just opened the door. The truth unveiled. Rennick ran. His team followed, breath ragged, hearts pounding. Behind them, the shadows spread, silent, unstoppable. The rifts had fully opened, and the creatures were pouring through. The ancient ship had not been a weapon. It had been a lock, a seal holding back something far worse than war, worse than any empire's wrath. The true reason the galaxy's oldest species feared Earth was now clear. It had never been about humanity. It was about what lay beneath. Isha stumbled but caught herself. Captain. The exit. The cavern's entrance was gone, replaced by a shifting mass of darkness. The team was trapped. Keldor cursed. There's no way out. The whispers grew stronger. No longer distant. Now they spoke as if they stood right behind them. We were never gone. We only slept. A shape moved within the darkness, larger than the rest. A titanic form, its body flickering between solid and void. Eyes burned like dying stars, locked onto Rennick and his team. The ship's control panel flickered with energy, drawing Rennick's attention. The system was still active. A chance, a single, desperate chance. Isha caught his glance. You can shut it down, can't you? Rennick didn't answer. He sprinted to the console, fingers flying over alien symbols. The ship rumbled in response. Lights pulsed, something deep within its core stirring. The shadows screamed. Keldor fired again. His shots disappeared, swallowed by the darkness. One of the creatures lunged, its clawed fingers inches from Keldor's throat, before a sudden shockwave blasted through the cavern. Rennick had done it. The ship's final failsafe activated. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from its core. The rifts shrank, the darkness recoiling. The ancient creatures howled, their bodies flickering as reality rejected them once more. Isha fell to her knees, eyes wide. It's working. It's actually working. The largest figure, the first of them, locked eyes with Rennick. It didn't attack. It didn't scream. It only whispered, "This is not the end." Then it was gone. The cavern fell silent. The rifts were sealed. The whispers stopped. Rennick collapsed against the console, exhausted. Keldor and Isha sat beside him, their bodies shaking. Earth was safe. For now. But they all knew the truth. The galaxy's oldest species had never feared humanity. They had feared the day when someone, anyone, was foolish enough to open the door. And now, the creatures knew someone had. They would return. And next time, they would not come alone.